if you want to learn Chinese, you will have to learn thousands of characters. So the question is, how? And I've struggled a lot with this because imagining thousands of random lines is very hard to remember. So I'm going to tell you exactly how I went from zero to learning 1000 characters and being able to use the same system with strong confidence to learn thousands of them. Let's get started. So, how to memorize 1000 characters? I will tell you what didn't work. Because when I started learning Chinese, people told me, you need to do like Chinese people, you need to memorize. You need to repeat and repeat and repeat to write the same character a lot of times until you get it. And I was like, okay, I understand I have to do part of this, as with other languages, you flashcard or whatever. But this is madness. This is madness. I don't have 20 years to learn like a Chinese person, and also it's very boring. And like they usually give you the grids or even without grids, but it's very boring. And also, it's not as simple as it looks like because you have all those strokes. And when you have one character, you need to know. I mean, it's not that intuitive. So I tried to do this, but it was not good for me. Then I discovered Scrita. Scrita is an app that actually helps you with different stuff. And here, what they do is that it's like before, you can write it with your tablet or whatever, and then it has some nice features like they give you instant feedback if you're writing it in the correct order, the strokes. They organize some words or some characters by collections. It was better, but it was boring and not that effective to learn. So what did I do? What I did was following a path in which I realized that writing is overrated. Why? Because in some successful courses, they actually start without the characters. They teach you the pinyin. So you see, they teach you something like this. I'm a Spaniard in this case. And then they introduce you to this table, which is the pinyin table, which even Chinese people use to type on a keyboard. Also, let's think about it. I mean, let's be critical. For Chinese people, writing Chinese character is an art. So I guess that means it's not that easy because otherwise it would not be an art. And what I saw is that even if everybody encourages you, or almost everybody encourages you to learn to write, it's a distraction more than a helper. I mean, if you learn Chinese because you want to learn how to write, because it's beautiful, whatever, great. But for most people, including me, what we wanted was to speak Chinese, and that's it, to communicate, to use it, to learn something with it. So there are other cases, some legal or some official ones to encapsulate them, in which learning to write is useful, but overall, I would say for almost everybody, you should not think about writing. It's a waste of time. So in the end, you should spend time on what matters, on what brings impact to your path to learn Chinese. And in my opinion, that means that you should learn to type and you should forget about writing in Mandarin. You just go from here, the pinyin, to the characters. And that's all what you need. But alright, so you don't need to write, you just need to type. But still, we have the issue. We have reduced the complexity, but still, we have a lot to take in, which is to learn thousands of characters. How to do that? I know the solution is diverse. It would be to go to an environment where you get more exposure. It would be to do flashcards. It's different things. But there are tricks, and there should be tricks. So let's go to that. I'm a visual person, and for me, visualizing what I learn is super important. So what I discovered is that there is this thing called pictographic characters, like in this case. Because at the beginning, this was what happened with the most basic characters. So they need a word for tree, they need a word for mountain, and they just wrote it like that. They have different names, but that's the idea. And it's awesome, like if you think about it a little bit, you can say like, okay, yeah, this looks like a tree, and this, yeah, I mean, kind of like a mountain. Great. Even there is an app that I discovered, which is Chinesey, which actually does it for you. They give you these pre-made visuals that help you a lot, to be honest, a lot. So this is a person, run, this is moon, this is the mountain that we saw before. So let's compare the mountain here and the mountain here. Yeah, there are different ways. It's just a helper, but it's pre-made. That's very cool. But as I was using the app, I was realizing, and then I checked it out, that it's not that easy to follow this one because the number of pictographic characters is very reduced. So that means that it can help you sometimes, actually a few times, but usually not. But it's nice, like you can learn some characters through this path. Great. But you need something else. And then is when I discovered this book called Remembering Simplified Kangxi. I bought it, and basically what it does is that here you have an example of how it works. They give you one character, and then they teach you how to make up stories based on specific elements that you might appreciate in a character, and then you compound them. And this was great. I mean, it was very insightful, looked very cool. But as I was going on, I realized that this was very expensive in my mind because remembering all these things took a lot of my energy. And the point of this method is that you are able to start remembering them, and then you use them, and then you forget about the stories many times. But I did not succeed taking all of these heavy stories in my mind. And the origin of this book is Japanese. I mean, this was first applied to Japanese and then was for Chinese. It was the same because, I mean, historically speaking, Japanese borrowed the characters from Chinese. So, anyway, the thing is that I need to find something that was cheaper in my mind, that was less time consuming to create, that was something I could make on my own, that was something that I could apply more universally and way faster. And then I was one day at class and I realized about something very interesting. So it was one of my first months, and the teacher gave us something like this. It was a story with some lines. Actually, I was the only one at class, but anyway. So he gave us a text, and then I had to say what it means. In this case, I like to drink coffee. 我喜欢喝咖啡. But then he asked me, isolated way, what is this? And then I didn't know. I didn't know. But I just knew it. And then if he asked me about how to pronounce this or that, I didn't know. I didn't know the meaning. I didn't know the pronunciation. It was like there was something broken in my mind. What I discovered is that it's different to recall and to remember. So when I have words in context, I could remember them. When there were words in context in a sentence, I could deduct the meaning. I could use it. I could know what's the meaning, how to pronounce. But isolated, I could not. I was frustrated. Honestly, I was frustrated. So I was thinking, how to fix this problem? How I can remember thousands of characters? Because yes, I can do a lot of different things, but I wanted to learn thousands of them. So how? And then is when I discovered something. I remember I was in the past in one class, and the teacher showed us a character. It was this one. It means eyes. And I remember that she told us, when you see this thing, sometimes it means eyes. And I was like, all right, but not much useful because just sometimes. And, it's great, but what about all of this chunk? So I tried to figure out what was that. And I learned the following. So it turns out that you can take characters and you can deconstruct them. And here you have one example. And also there are different ways to deconstruct them. These are Chinese components. Let's imagine one example. We have this character. It means vegetables. So now the question for you is, how come are you going to remember this a bunch of lines, random lines? But there is a trick. I mean, there are two ways. You can repeat and repeat and repeat, like if you were a robot, or Don't know, but there is another way, which is using this thing called radicals. So instead of thinking about the whole number of lines, you can deconstruct them in small things. You break down the complexity. So for example, this upper part, it's grass. This one is claw. And this one is tree. But you know what? Most of these are not characters, meaning that they are not words either. So in the case of tree, I mean, it is, but more or less. But the other ones, they might not, which is interesting. But some correspond to characters like the last part, mu, means tree. It would be a bit different, but you see, it's similar in this case, a bit different. But this is mu, this is tree. But for other ones, they might not be characters. Actually, most of the time, they are not characters. But it's interesting because if you can you can have a system in which you deconstruct things into smaller blocks and you can make an image of that, a mental image, then it's much easier to remember them and to create associations and to use mnemonic techniques. So let's take one example, one silly one. Everybody can imagine things in different way, but this thing is a radical, and this is one way you could interpret it. I will give you examples of what I have done. So I use Anki, a tool for flashcards, and then I have here this one, which is a radical. And for me, that means a house on a cliff. So the cliff is this, and the house is this. A bit abstract, but it works. Another example would be this one. We have two variants of the same radical, but it's okay. It happens. And it means rap. And I imagine it as a sort of mini movie or animation in which we have a kid rapping a door. Now let's go for a more full example. So let's imagine this character that we have here, and let's break it down by radical. So we have this one, that means speech, this second one, and this third one. There is a common interpretation of the meaning of each radical. Personally, I follow most of them, but sometimes it's more meaningful for me to little bit change the meaning. So for me, this is the speech, for me, this is beam, and for me, this is to shoot. And one example where you can find, for example, the first radical in different characters would be this case. So you can find in this first one, second one, third one, and fourth one example. So suddenly, something that looked like a bunch of random lines became something tangible and that you can remember with a meaning and mental image. And a mnemonic line for me, or silly line to remember, would be, in this case, sure means to try. So my mnemonic line is an arca loading an arrow, leaning on a beam while waiting for a commander's speech to try a new shot. So what I do is that I have the meaning, and then I try to use the components or the radicals in different ways. So the beam, speech, and arrow, similar. That's how it goes. These are the kanji radicals. The origin of this is because some time ago they have thousands and thousands of characters. So Chinese people wanted to create a dictionary, and somebody came up with this idea that they could organize the characters based on different things, but one of them is based on radical, and then by strokes. So here you have a list that is mostly complete of the radicals based on the number of strokes. You have between 200 and 300 symbols depending on how you count, because for example, if you count variants, well, that's more, and in my opinion they should be considered as different symbols because you need to learn those variations, and most of the time they are pretty different. You can go here, you have them on Wikipedia. It's not the most complete thing, but you can see the meaning, you can see them, and then if you Google about a list of kanji radicals or list of radicals in Chinese, you can find the rest, the variations, and then that's it. You use Anki. What I would say is that if you really want to learn Chinese, it pays off to learn 300 things or 300 symbols that mean nothing. I mean, they are not words. They have meaning, but they are not words. But it's totally worth it because when you then see a character, you connect things. You can distinguish them. It's magical. It's honestly mind blowing. And what I would recommend is that you take a flashcard tool, let's say Anki, and then you put like I did before. Here I'm reusing a template from words, but you have a radical, you have the meaning, you have example words, and if you want some remarks for you. You know, the kanji actually have their own pronunciation, but I don't care. They don't mean anything for me. For me, what they bring to me is the meaning. And because most of them are not words, I don't want to spend time. I didn't want to spend time doing that. I just wanted to get the meaning to then use and apply that to create movies and pictures in my mind for Chinese characters. And two tools I could recommend, one is Anki, as I said, another one is Hanzicraft. Hanzicraft is very cool because you can go there to Hanzicraft, you can search for something, let's say Tsai, which means one of the meaning is vegetables, and they give you the radicals. So in this case, it would be grass, claw, and tree. Great. And then if you want, you can use this to try to remember at least part of it, to distinguish, to make a mnemonic line. I don't make mnemonic lines all the time. Most of the time I don't, but sometimes I do. And another one, for example, this one. So, 喜欢, the word that was difficult for me. So this is a scholar. It goes from top to down to bottom. So we have a scholar, this one. We have a mouth, this one. We have a to divide. For me, it's a belly. Depending on the variant, it's a happy belly or angry belly. This is one. For me, it's a banana. Much easier to remember. And this is mouth. So in this case, it's not that intuitive if you want to make a story, but at least if you want to decompose it, to try to remember its parts, then it's much easier. So you have a scholar, you have a mouth, you have a angry belly, you have one or a banana, and then you have a mouth. And if you don't know how to break down a character into radicals, or sometimes mix of radicals and other characters that are words or part of words, you can actually use this search. You can use it. Hanzicraft is the best one I have found to decompose them. And in the end, we go to this final situation in which you do forget the radicals because you just learn the words, remember them. So when I see war, I don't need to deconstruct it. I know it is. And when I see other words like Zhao, even if it's similar, I know it is. But it takes time. And what we are looking here is for a hack. At the end, you get to learn and distinguish thousands. And beyond, there are different things that you can do to learn words, to memorize characters. There is one in particular that I would say that maybe at the beginning was not that relevant, but when you know a little bit, even if it's a little bit, becomes super useful. That is Do Chinese. So Do Chinese is an app where you get text based on level, and then it's super awesome because this is one of the best ways to recall characters and remember them. What you get is the characters here in a line, making a story. You can come here and you will see the character, you will see the pinyin or the pronunciation, and you will see the translation. And if you don't know it, great, because you can save it, and then it has built-in flashcards, which is nice. Then they also pronounce it. You can pronounce it. You can even customize if you want it slower or faster. And you can activate and see the pinyin if your level is very basic. And you can also see the translation of the sentence. This app is paid, but honestly, totally worth it. If you want, I can teach you more things I have learned. But for now, that's it. So to recap, The problem is that it is difficult to learn so many words, mostly if you don't live in China or if you don't want to spend years of your life repeating and repeating and repeating. And some of the best ways I have found is trying to apply a visual strategy and one that brings or activates your senses to create vivid memories when you see characters. And the radicals is best one I have found so far.